Welcome everyone to session number 1, entitled Online Assignments During Remote Learning. Okay, before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to mention that if you have any burning questions, to wait to the end of the presentation, and the questions will be taken verbally. At any point of time during the session, you may write down any questions in the OneNote, and I will put down the link, and this OneNote questions will be for the offline discussion, not for the discussion during this session. So without further delay, let me introduce today's speaker. Today's speaker is, this session's speaker, is Apple Ko, Senior Lecturer, Engineering, Product Development, Science, Maths, and Technology. Apple has been actively developing and executing interdisciplinary activities to demonstrate the interconnectivity between various subjects to promote students' appreciation in the applications of science and engineering concepts. She will be describing the implementation and learning points of online assignments conducted in 10.008, Engineering to Ensure Fairer Assessment of Individual Competency. So without further delay, I would like to welcome Apple.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you see my screen? Okay, maybe not. Let me fix the screen.
Apple, do you have the sharing rights?
Yes, I do, because I see appearing, right?
Can't hear you. Are you unmuted?
Yes, I'm unmute.
Oh, you can hear. Oh, okay. Because no, we are in the same room. Sorry for the confusion. Joelle and myself are in the same room, so I had decreased the volume. Okay, thank you. Please carry on.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my video a little bit during the talk, because I think my bandwidth might be a little bit low. So and then I'll turn it back on later. All right. Okay, so what happens is that we are going to talk about engineering in the physical world, okay, and the online assessments that we do in engineering in the physical world during the remote learning period. Okay, so I'm going to represent the team in presenting this. All right. So what happens is that engineering in the physical world, it is about, it's a first year term 3 course. It runs in January to April. And what we do is that we introduce to students the concepts and laws of the physical world that explains how engines and refrigerators and this kind of thermomechanical sort of equipment, thermoelectric energy systems, and even solar systems as well. So how do they work, and how do we design for them and calculate for them? Okay, so over here in this slide, all right, in this slide, we've got a sort of a diagram, a pictorial diagram of what students go through in every week, the topics that we teach. And over here on the right hand side of the slide is just basically a picture of the activity that we do in class. So this is a Stirling engine. Basically what we have is that usually this candle is lighted up. It produces heat, it creates what we call a hot side. And because of the temperature difference to the cold side, we will see this wheel spinning. Okay, so this is what they learn in this class called Engineering and Physical World. So in the normal circumstances, okay, so in the normal sort of teaching period, we typically have 2 times of 2.5-hour cohort session. And we also have hands-on activities and 1D and 2D projects that are spread out across the term. So it's usually done so that it reinforces the concepts that students learn. And what happens is that because it is held in January to April, there was the whole pandemic breakout. We had to move to a hybrid learning sort of measure, okay, in week 10 due to safe distancing. And then from week 11 onwards, because of circuit breaker, we had to go full remote learning. Okay, so what happens is that I'm making use of the opportunity to also advertise the article that we have written for the Pedagogy newsletter. So if you're interested to know how physical world transition from the normal format of face-to-face in-class teaching to a full remote learning sort of teaching, during one term itself, you can read these issues of pedagogy newsletter, which is on page 30. It says page 30, called Redesigning Co-op-Based Learning for Effective Remote Learning. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate on this portion over here. So I think my slides will let me zoom. So let me try. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate this portion here. Okay, where typically in a normal term, what we have is a final exam in week 14. Okay, because of the remote learning and students cannot come back to class, we changed and substituted our final exam with 2 online assignments. Okay, so these 2 online assignments are done from home. They are done synchronously online. So in other words, all 400 students will log in to our learning management system at the same time and then do the assignment. Right. So that's what we are going to concentrate on, and we are going to hear more about the learning experience from our standpoint and the format of how we do this online assignment. Okay. So by default, our final exam usually is about 2 hours long. It's a paper-based exam, so done on campus, closed book. It has 2 sections. Section 1, which consists of MCQ and short questions, and section B, which is a structured question, and we've got 3 of that. So the structured question requires students to show their workings. Okay, so they will need to write on a piece of paper how did they get this final answer, right? So this was particularly challenging because we didn't want a system where, you know, if we do it online, students can easily find answers online and cheat the system, right? So what we did was that we split our final exam into 2 online assignments, one in week 12, one in week 14. Okay, so the main reason is because we want to split the topics up as well, so that each online assignment covers fewer topics. And the weightage is thus a bit smaller, like we split it more. Okay, so let me first talk about the week 12 online assignment, and then later I'll go on to explain how we modified the week 12 assignment for the week 14 assignment, which is the final or the second assignment that we have done for physical work. Okay, so in the first assignment that we had, we kept more or less that the sections required. So in other words, we still have the MCQ section, which is section A. There are only 5 MCQ questions that students need to do in 3 minutes. So time was a bit pressurizing, right? And then we've got section B, which is still the long structured question. Okay, take note that over here we said that the timing is about 1 to 3 hours. In other words, the students can take more than 1 hour to do the assignment. They can take up to 3 hours to do the assignment. So this is also known as time grading, which I will explain a little bit more in the next slide. Okay, but we included an additional section, and this additional section is known as section C. This is optional, so in other words, this is not compulsory, but if you do the question correctly, then the students have a chance to earn bonus points. Okay, so we will also explain, I will also explain in the next slide why we do this bonus question. But the main thing is that this assignment can potentially take less than 3 hours, or it takes a maximum time of 3 hours. Okay, it's done synchronously on eDimension, which is our learning management system. And the next thing is that it is open book. Okay, so it's open book, it is online, it is off campus, and they do it from home. All right. So what happens is in week 14, the format stays more or less the same. We still have the time grading in section B, where students can take 30 minutes to 1 hour to do the assignment. And what we also had was that we removed the optional questions. So we removed that bonus questions. Okay, so in short, this is what we do. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide to explain a little bit more about this whole format. Okay, so over here you notice that on the left hand side in the background picture is actually a screenshot of what our eDimension system looks like. Okay, so let me just zoom in. Okay, so over here that's what we see. Typically, this is what the students see as well on the learning management system. Okay, there are section A, which represents MCQ. So if the students need to do the MCQ, they will need to click on this. Okay, if the students are done with the MCQ and they want to move on to section B, they click on the next link. Okay, notice that section B actually has 2 links, and that's the reason why is because in the first link for section B, it actually shows the questions. Okay, so e-dimension will randomize the questions and will show the questions in the first link, which then the student will need to type their final answers in the first link. Okay, why we have the second link is because, as said earlier, the students will need to do some kind of calculations. They will need to present their work. They will need to show their working. So students will need to upload their workings, and they upload their workings in the second link. Okay, so I explain this a little bit more. Okay, what happens is, if I look at the general format, as said earlier, section A has 5 MCQ in 3 minutes. We have a big collection of questions. Okay, maybe not that big. We have a collection of questions for MCQ. There are 25 of them in total. The learning management system, e-dimension, will randomize the questions to be given to the students. So we don't randomize it. But what we make sure is that these questions are of similar concepts, or they are of similar difficulty when we arrange it. Okay, so what happens is that a good portion of the questions are conceptual, and a certain portion of the questions are calculation based. All right, so with that, let's move on to section B. Okay, as said earlier, section B has 2 questions, and the 2 questions we say has time grading. Okay, so what do we mean by time grading? Okay, in section B, students can take any amount of time, maximum 3 hours, to do the questions. All right, all the questions in there, in total, the students will only see 2, but the collection of questions in section B is 32. Okay, so we have 32 questions in section B. All right, and then another 4 for question 2 of section B. Okay, so what this means again is e-dimension will randomize the questions for them. Okay, why we do a big collection is to minimize the possibility of students getting the exact same set of questions and then asking their friends for help. Okay, so this is one sort of a measure we take, because we don't quite trust students when it comes to cheating, right? Okay, so this is one measure that the team take. So what happens with that is that with the time grading of any amount of time the students can take to do the questions, is again to minimize the possibilities of students seeking external help, okay, without penalty. All right, so what this means is that if you understand the concept very well, and because it is open book, the students should be able to finish the question in 1 hour. Okay, so this is tried and tested in terms of the timing of 1 hour for 2 questions. This is also tried and tested in our past exams for the past about maybe 5 years or so, or maybe 7, I can't remember. Okay, so this is why we do time grading. Okay, now in section C, which is a bonus question, we only have 1 of that, and it is a pool of 2 questions. Okay, in section C for the bonus question, this question type actually challenges the students even more because it requires students to integrate different concepts together. So when we do a bonus section, is to really keep students interested and challenged so that they can better their scores and they will not want to help their friends, in other words. Okay, there are some other instructions that we do. Okay, so as said earlier, if you saw, section B has 2 links, one to submit the final answer numerical and the other one to submit their working. We also created a practice run prior to this online assessment, okay, to get students familiar with the system, the sequence, and how to submit their answers. We also inform students that, we will randomly select students to check their answers by oral verification. And if they are sick or they have MC, then they will just take an oral exam instead of this online assignment. Okay, so let's look a little bit more in the time grading. All right, so in time grading, how we assign points is that if you finish the assignment within 1 hour, you get 100% of the score. Okay, so an example is, I'm going to use myself as an example. So if I score 9 out of 10 for correctness and I submit within 1 hour, I get the full 9 points. On the other hand, if I score 9 out of 10 for correctness and I submit at the 2nd hour mark, I get a time penalty. So I need to get 6.75 points out of 10. So how we do time grading is that we do it on a 10-minute block. okay? And every 10 minutes, the score will drop linearly by a certain percentage, okay? So let's look at some results, some analysis, okay? I think the more interesting one is with the time grading. So I'll skip the portion of section A and the portion of section C, okay? So for time grading, what we notice is that the average time the students take is 87 minutes, which is longer than the 1 hour that we expected them to do, okay? What we think is happening is that the students may not be confident in answering the questions, so they will take time to check their notes because it's open book before answering the question, okay? So we feel that with this, time grading is actually a very good method to assess students' understanding of a topic in an open book exam, all right? But again, this is just one assignment that we have done. We obviously need to further study a little bit more so that we can reach such a conclusion for sure, okay? The other thing that we also notice is that based on the randomization, about 33.8%, which is about 130 students, they receive identical sets of questions for sections B, okay? So what this means is that they are the exact 2 same questions that maybe 3 or 4 students in the same class receive, okay? We did grading, so we grade this manually, and every instructor is assigned to grade a certain class. What we noticed is that even though they receive identical questions, their answers are not the same. Their workings are also not the same, okay? Which means that most probably because of the time grading and because it is very hard to find another friend with the same set of questions, we may possibly be able to reduce this whole cheating issue, okay, with time grading, okay? A good point to take note is that when we look at bonus questions, a good percentage attempted, so about 84% attempted, but the highest score is 4 and the average score is about 1. So they don't do really well, which shows a lot about their integration of concepts. Okay. So in terms of student feedback on such format for the exam, the main negative feedback that we received was the duration. And the duration is in particular with section A, because we've got 5 MCQ, 3 minutes, and some of the questions are calculation, okay? So a lot of people say that they do not have enough time, and they say that we are very brutal in our time, okay? The comment that is positively received is actually the format. So they like the idea of time grading because they feel that it dissuades cheaters. They will not go seek other help. Okay, so what are the modifications that we did after receiving feedback from this week 12 assignment and also judging from the students' comments, right, and their responses in the assignment is that we increased the amount of time for the MCQ question. So in section A, instead of 36 seconds for 1 MCQ, we increase it to 1 minute per MCQ. And we have all the questions to be conceptual, so there are no calculations at all, okay? In section B, we still do the time grading because it was very well received. But for section B, we have changed it such that it is a submission using Excel. Okay, so the question will be released on Excel itself. Okay, they will need to download the file from the LMS. What happens is that they will need to analyze the data and do their workings on Excel and submit the Excel file for grading. Okay, so this is an example of the Excel file that they see. Okay, at the top here are questions. The students can type in their answers over here. And what happens is how we check their solutions is that we advise students to type in the formulas into the cell so that we can double check the formulas to see whether they understand how the answer is being obtained. Okay, so let me just summarize some of the learning points for this particular sort of online assessment that we have done. Okay, so the first thing is that when we do such a synchronized online assessment, it is very hard for students to contact instructors if there are questions. So we actually had to make sure that the questions and the settings are perfectly okay before the assignments itself, which takes a lot of coordination between the instructors because we are all working remotely. The other thing is that we need to release this information as early as possible. So what we did was we created a frequently asked questions on a discussion board students post their questions about the assignment, about the format of the assignment, about their anxiety issues on it, and then we answer, which all students can see, so that they understand how this assignment works. Okay, the not so good news is that with e-dimension, there's some limitations. Okay, so with these limitations, a lot of times students can possibly get locked out of the system when they refresh the browser or when they lost internet connection. So what happens then is that we will then need to manually email the students the questions they have attempted, because if they reattempt the assignment again by clicking the link on the LMS, it leads to a different question that is being given to them. Okay. We also notice that students, sometimes they cannot follow instructions, so they do the sections in different order. Okay, and then they panic and email us saying that they realize they did it in a different order. How? Okay, so the practice run that we have created is to minimize this whole not following the instructions. But what we notice as well is that a good proportion of students do not do the practice run. So only 33% of the students completed the practice run. So if we ever do such online assignments again, the recommendation is to make the practice run graded with a small percentage so that they understand the seriousness of this online assignment. Okay, the last point about this particular assignment is that because we have a very big collection of questions, the grading was very painful because it's totally manual. Okay? It's only in MCQ that is automated grading. So with that, the time grading points as well is not an automatic assigning of points. We instructors had to assign the points manually. Okay, so we need to do the calculation for them and then assign it. Okay. I think the good news about this whole online assignment and how, because of the pandemic, is that we rethink about how we create assessments. We rethink about the whole paper-based exams. So one very good example was the Excel that we saw earlier. Okay, why not we use other tools that we see are more reflective of real-world situation on their future workplace. Okay, we can use such authentic methods, okay, to create more holistic sort of assessments. Okay, so we actually are working more on this area. So we are looking at different assessment methods, and we're also looking at the format of assessment methods to make it more holistic and authentic. So that's what we have been doing after this whole term. Okay, so I would just like to conclude that we like to thank all faculty and staff who help with this subject, engineering in the physical world, okay, especially in the SMT cluster, the science, math, and technology cluster, and also our educational technology team. Okay, so this is a photo of our team. And we are also very thankful for Dario because he did not participate in this team this year, but he provided us quite a few questions for the online assignment. Okay, thank you. I'll end my slideshow.
Hi, thank you, Apple, for that insightful presentation. I would like to also thank the audience for listening. Please raise your hand if you have a question for Apple. If you have any questions.
Sergey has a question.
No, I just clapped, but...
Oh,
okay.
I thought it was a raised hand. I'm sorry, Sergey.
It's okay. I did not see the raise hand button, but very, very well done. Very, very nice.
Okay. Maybe if you can't find the raise hand button, you can just message in the chat.
Maybe I ask a question like, do you plan to follow the same format for the current term? I'm a bit confused with the shift of timetable, but I wonder whether you're planning to reuse this.
Yeah, so Sergey, that the physical world, that course that I just presented, that was the last run of that particular subject. So that subject will not run anymore. And I'm not teaching this term, as in for freshman, so we are not running this format. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Oka has a question. Oka, please unmute yourself.
Just wondering, like, how many students get lockout during the week 12 and 14, where you mentioned you may need to send the questions through email, and like how fast like the faculty responds to this? Is it within the 1 to 2 hours? Do they get like extension or something like that?
Okay, so I cannot remember the exact number, but I think it is less than 20. I can double check the number for you and let you know. I'll put it in the OneNote. And usually we take about 5 minutes or less to answer. So we have, so what we do is that we have 2 to 3 instructors on standby during the assignment period. And prior to the assignment, we told students, if you have a problem with this certain question, then email this particular instructor. Okay, so the instructor will then receive the email maybe in, so students panic quite quickly lah. Okay, so they send an email very fast to us and we reply within 5 minutes, okay, with the correct question that they have attempted. So what we do is that we double check on eDimension, what's the question they have attempted. We then take it out and then we email it to them. Okay, what we do is that we will check in terms of their submission, how long they took, okay? And then what we then do is that we will check according to the time block, right? Because what happens is that the grades is only penalized after every 10 minutes. So if it is within that time minute, then basically they do not get the extra time lah, because they are not penalized, it's still within the 10 minutes, in other words, yeah.
Okay, so just wondering, the extra time, is it automated or like how do you manage? How do you tell the students how much extra time?
You mean the 1 to 3 hours, is it, Oka?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on eDimension, we will just set the timer to 3 hours for the assignment duration. So it is automated. The eDimension will see that 3 hours. The students will see the 3 hours with the timer bar. So on their assignment question, they have a timer bar to tell them how much time they have left. Okay, what then happens is that we will download the results as to when they submit their answers. So eDimension is also able to tell us the duration they took from the start to the submission of answers. What then happens next is that we will need to manually pull out those time and then put in the marks for the time. So that is what we did. Yeah.
So this is after the exam?
Yes, this is after the exam, correct.
Yes.
Okay, great. We've come to the end of the session. Unfortunately, we can't take another question. Do put it in the OneNote if you have any other questions, and that can be discussed offline. We